What if every aspect of your life was under someone else's control? From access to services, where you can travel to, what resources you can use, even water, and whether you can build on your own land. Well, that's the reality of millions of Palestinians who say Israel's occupation has been depriving them of freedom for generations, but that things have gotten significantly worse since October 7th. I'm Anelise Borges, and this is The Stream. You wake up in the morning and have a rough idea of what your day will be like, right? You will shower, get in your car, head to work, and maybe at the end of the day, you'll meet some friends out for dinner. Well, if you're Palestinian living in, say, the occupied West Bank, that would be virtually impossible. First, because Israel controls your water supply, and when that's over, no showers. Then, while driving to work, you could stumble upon a new checkpoint, or an old one, and never make it to work in time, if you make it at all. And if Israel decided to build a new segment of its wall between you and said friends or family of yours, well, you probably won't see them in a very long time. On today's show, we look into what decades of occupation mean for people in Palestine, day in and day out, and how that is every bit as violent as war itself. Joining us today to give us some insight into that reality are Leila Warah, a Palestinian journalist and content creator living in Aida refugee camp in the occupied West Bank, Mohammad Hureini, an activist living in Masafer Yatta, also in the occupied West Bank, and Sami Khalidi, whose family home in the Old City was seized by Israeli settlers. He's joining us from occupied East Jerusalem. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on The Stream today. Leila, I would like to start with something you produce for us, a short explainer, in order to make us, who never experienced anything remotely as absurd as Israel's occupation, understand what life is like for you. Take a look.
As a teenager in 1948, my grandmother was forcibly expelled from Nakba, a village in Jerusalem. She was exiled to this overcrowded refugee camp in the West Bank. My family's village is just 30 kilometers away from where I'm standing right now, except we can't get there because of Israel's giant, ugly apartheid wall. And the wall isn't the only thing that stops Palestinians from moving freely on their own land. Israeli military checkpoints are scattered all across the occupied West Bank. Military checkpoints that Israeli soldiers can arbitrarily close at a moment's notice as a form of collective punishment and psychological torture. And Palestinians are constantly being watched by the Israeli military. Aida refugee camp is surrounded by 6 Israeli watchtowers, several cameras, an AI-powered gun, and a military base, which all watch over the residential neighborhood. The Israeli military frequently and violently raids Aida refugee camp, harassing its residents. In 2017, Aida camp was declared the most tear-gassed community in the world. At any moment, you could be running from tear gas. You're eating dinner, then tear gas. You're a kid at school, tear gas. Now, if you've been tear gassed, you're gonna want to rinse it out of your eyes, but you might not even be able to do that, because almost all of our water sources are controlled by Israel. Palestinians only get water every 15 to 20 days, which is why all Palestinian houses in the West Bank have these giant water tanks on them. And if you're out of luck until the next refill. No laundry, no showering, no brushing your teeth, no doing the dishes, nothing. Why? Because Israel is diverting all of our water to the over 500,000 Israeli settlers living across the occupied West Bank. Settlers who get an unlimited supply of running water and so don't need any tanks. Israel's occupation is built into the very fabric of Palestinian society, making it impossible to see where the effects begin and end.
Leila, wow. I mean, it really is all aspects of life, isn't it? I would like to ask you if things have gotten worse since October 7th.
Definitely. So like you said, it's absolutely absurd, and it has been for decades. But since October 7th, everything which has already been very, very bad has just become exponentially worse. From the checkpoints to being able to travel between cities to just wanting to go out to a coffee shop and needing to check the news first to see if the Israeli military has raided whatever city that you live in.
When you talk about checkpoints, for example, are things more violent? Are things more tense? Can you give us a real sense of what it's like now these days?
All of the above. So they get closed a lot more frequently. They're much more violent when they are closing them, especially for Palestinians. I am very privileged in the sense of I carry an American passport. I look completely like a foreigner. But for Palestinians going through, they're getting their phones checked, they're getting beaten, they're getting physically abused. I have a friend from the camp who was kind of shortly after October 7th on the way back from Ramallah, who was taking an English exam, and he got arrested at one of the checkpoints for no reason. He's been in administrative detention for, first they gave him 6 months, and then they renewed it for another 4 months or 6 months. And it's, so
And
no one knows what's going to happen when they go outside. Maybe they'll end up in jail.
We spoke about administrative detention here, and obviously people don't really know why they're detained because the evidence against them is classified. Mohammad, I want to bring you into the conversation as well, because you're also in the occupied West Bank and you're currently under house arrest. I would like for viewers to have a rough idea of what you're going through and a small glimpse into why. Take a look.
So behind me, there is our land and our legal outpost of Batman, where is the most violent settlers are living in. And here is my land where always we are having fights with the settlers who's trying to take over our land and colonize our land, who used also to try to bring their sheep and destroying our crops and destroying the trees by the sheep, and even by them in the night destroying and cutting off down the trees, as what happened even yesterday, where they came in the morning provoking my family, arresting 3 of my family, my father, my little brother and my sister, just because of settlers who came in the land, and even we tried to take them out of the land. So that means you as a Palestinian living in this area have no right to defend or to protect your land.
They can bear because I decided.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
And you allowed, you can see, you allowed them to be in our land, and
we decide
who is in the Israel or not.
Growing up under this constant threat of settler attacks and Israeli soldiers' raids, night raids on your family and your community, because the occupation will let you pay a high price for being an activist by arresting, threatening, attacking, terrorizing you, by all the means that he can use against you to intimidate you and your family to stop your activism. Since I started my activism until now I'm 20 years old, I have been arrested 10 times, and yesterday was the 11th time. And my main crime is just to defend and protect my land.
I mean, Mohammad, why do you think Masafer Yatta is so strategic for Israel? Why are they trying to push residents out of there so often?
So, hi everyone. First, to speak about Masafer Yatta is like the southern tip of the West Bank, which is laying and bordering the Green Line of the 767 borders. And since decades, we have been suffering from the occupation, since they declare it as a firing zone, military training for the army, which is, it was the third justification to colonize and evacuate, terrorizing the people from the land, which is the first policy that they use. And later on, evacuating people under this justification, later, like this, the military base that they have built in our area, later on it became an outpost and then settlements and being legalized by the Israeli authorities, which this settlement who came, like settlers came from abroad living in it, and settlers are a tool of the occupation who terrorize, attack the people, make the pressure on their life to let the Palestinians didn't feel that they are in a safe zone. They are in a safe, they are not safe in their villages, in their own home. So since, for me, an example, since I just grew up under this constant threat, I have been denied from most of my basic human rights as a human. When you, like, for example, other children who used to come to educate in my village, they used to come across a road that is full of attacks and threat of settlers attacks on them. Many children, they stop their educational path just throughout the violence that the settlers are attacking. And even the settler who attack, they are protected by the Israeli soldiers who are always surrounding the area. And now what they are doing is just surrounding as a belt of outposts and settlements surrounding the villages, banning you from your right to movement. And so if I want to go to my friend now, I need to count to 10 before I go to anywhere from my home or from my village. So, like, they are
When you say
every day
now, you
making
say
life
past
harder
October 7th as well. Do you think that
and
things have
harder.
gotten more difficult for you guys after October 7th?
Exactly. After October 7th, everything had become the double. Before it was very bad, and now it's like more brutally, like became more brutality. I mean, the settlers who used to attack us before, now they are the reserved in the army, and they are using their places in the army and the government to do whatever they can do before the 7th of October by building new outposts, terrorizing the people, burning the house. And, you know, last week we have witnessed a very brutal attack on the village in Khalid. They have burned and the agricultural land, broken trees. They were even coming towards us in the village, and they just chased us. They were like more than 200 settlers who was armed, having a gasoline, burning down the village. So it was like, I mean, the daily basis that we are living under it is like a very constant threat and very, very like fearful. The people here are living in anxiety. Like most of the homes and, you know, most of the villages in Masafiyat is under official right of demolition by the Israeli government, and even the settlers who have been now they are now under the protection of the Israeli soldiers, so they can do anything. And for example, you heard now in my story that we have been arrested just to defend our land, to protect our land from the settlers who started to use the pastoral colonialism and stealing the Palestinian lifestyle.
And obviously, just a clarification for viewers that might not be following this, settlements are illegal under international law. And yet, you guys have been under so much pressure because of these settlements and the settlers. Sami, your family has just gone through something insane and also heartbreakingly common these days, or I would say these decades. I would like to share with our viewers just what happened to your family and then get your reaction. Take a look.
2 weeks ago, settlers came into this house, my family's house, which is part of a waqf or a trust endowment. The settlers came in protected by the police. They barged in, broke the door and came in. It was during rush hours, so we got there late. The neighbors were trying to stop them but couldn't. By the time we got there and we tried to remove them from the house, the police started beating us, shoving us, and the settlers were able to stay in the house for a night. But then the next day, when we provided the court documents that we own the house and ratified by the Israeli courts, the courts, and because of community mobilization around the house and people from the neighborhood supporting us, we were able to get the house back. So we're now back in the house, but there's still a legal battle. Unfortunately, a lot of families in Jerusalem lose their house because settlers, like in our case, bring in forged documents, and the owners of the house don't have all the documents, they have documents, but the Israeli courts don't recognize these documents. And that's how a lot of houses have been lost in the old city to settlers. You know, they're taking over the old city house by house, and instead of calling it, settler colonialism, they're making it into a housing dispute between us and them. The old city is owned by Palestinians and will continue to be owned by Palestinians.
I mean, people just come, enter your house and stay there. It is really hard for the rest of the world, perhaps, to actually fathom what you guys go through. Can you share with us how common this is for Palestinians in the old city?
Yes, so this is quite common, especially this year. I think the Israelis are taking advantage of what's happening in Gaza, the genocide, to apply their long plans in the old city to basically try to take over the houses and change the city from Palestinian to Israeli house by house. Settlers have done this many times in the old city since the beginning of the year, and of course over the decades, but this is increasing, and they have been successful in many of the houses. We are actually a rare situation where we managed to get the settlers out because of community mobilization and lawyers and preparation from the family to get legal documents ratified by the Israeli courts themselves, which for now has the settlers out of the property. But there's a legal battle, continuing. And this is, the ridiculous thing is that, you have settlers going into the house where you're not in the house and you don't know what they've photographed in the house, and what they've, tried to use to forge other documents. And the Israeli courts create the situation where it's a housing legal dispute, instead of colonialism and expansion on the ground.
As you said, it is an insane reality and one that is very difficult to imagine. Mohammad, can you briefly talk to us? You already mentioned this, but for example, even getting an education is very hard under these circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah, to speak about the educational side, mainly in my community, not just only here, in the whole of the West Bank and mainly in Area C, where is the settlements and the outpost settlers violence. So mainly in my community, most of the children around, they have been facing atrocities during their educational path. For example, the settlements which was established since the 80s in my community, it have been established on the main road that connect the villages between each other. And when the settlements built at some point in your land, it will not just take your land alone. It will take over the surroundings, mainly the cancer. So when now there is some villages who have the schools. In my villages have the main school in the area, which is the surrounding villages. They need to come, and the children, they need to come to educate in my school. So the path that they need to cross, it's full of settler violence who's since decades start attacking these children, which is most of them, they have stopped their educational path. Why? Because of the worries of their parents on them. I have been accompanying children from my community, from one village to another village to my village. And at that time I was 13 years old, and then I reached 18. I used to do this. And I have been arrested, attacked with the children many times by the settlers. And even though we are under a military control of the occupation, when even you want to call the police to arrest the settler or attack us, and we have all of the documentation and the proofs that the settlers are attacking us, you just said nothing, because the soldiers and the army and the police, they are in the back of these settlers who's attacking. And when you want to go to the court, you're going, to a military court, and even the judge is a settler, which is your executioner, that you will never get the justice, and we never expect any justice from this court, because it's like an occupation. It's literal occupation, and we are speaking about colonialism, ethnic cleansing, apartheid policies. So we are fighting for our existence. We are fighting for our rights to exist in the land, because it is our right as a people living in this world. But I don't know if the world is seeing us as a people.
And you're fighting every day. Sorry, Mohammed, you're fighting every day through very basic things. And Sami, to build on what Mohammed was just saying, let's say you go through school, you manage to finish your education, but then what? Can you even get a job?
Yeah, right now it's probably the most difficult time to get a job. For a very long time. The unemployment rate is reaching around 50%. The economy in the West Bank is really tanking. You have 200,000 workers that used to work in Israel that cannot cross the checkpoint anymore because the Israelis denied their permits. They can't go to work anymore. The economy in the West Bank is constricting people in Jerusalem and in Palestinians in citizens of Israel that used to go and shop, for example, in the West Bank, are now no longer doing that because of the restrictions on checkpoints. So the economy is really suffering, and this is probably the worst time for anybody to graduating now to find a job.
And obviously
and
the consequences,
kinds of jobs.
The consequences of that are very real, and as we said at the onset, very violent as well. And all this, of course, has been going on for decades. Sometimes the level of dystopia is unreal. Take a look.
Buckle up, y'all, because today we have the new and latest episode of Dystopia in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Some soldiers, I think, flew this drone next to the balcony of a Palestinian family and begins threatening them.
ولا بنسوي شيء ولا بنسوي شيء احنا قاعدين بدورهم كيفين نحل عنه انا بنصحكم انه ديروا بالكم وديروا بالكم على اولادكم كل واحد اللي بيفكر يعمل شيء احنا نوصله واذا لازم نقتله.
I visited my sister in her home in Beit Omar, which is a village in Hebron. Sitting atop a hill, their beautiful home was surrounded by 3 Israeli settlements. I woke up in the middle of the night with my nephew and brother-in-law standing next to me. They'd spotted several laser pointers pointing into the house from one of the settlements that are nearby. And when I asked them what was happening, they told me to stay lying in bed because this was often a game that settlers played with them. The quote game was laser pointers from sniper rifles in the house at all times so that they knew that they could take a shot whenever they wanted.
Leila, your reaction, and very briefly, have you ever experienced something remotely similar to this?
So this, in terms of settler violence, this is something you see the most in Area C. So like somewhere where Mohammad lives, whereas in Area A, where I live in Haida refugee camp, what you kind of face on a day-to-day life is quite different. So for example, up there, you don't really see the settlers, but you see a lot more military presence. And so Haida refugee camp specifically is a highly, highly surveilled area, as you saw in the video earlier. And so there's, pointing right at the entrance to it, there's a remote controlled gun. And if you go walk up to it, so I've gone up there several times to go and film. And this is considered like a relatively dangerous area because kind of like what the person is saying in the video is soldiers are bored. Maybe they're sitting there and they just want to kind of mess with you. So like I've gone up there to film the remote controlled gun. All I'm carrying is a camera. And I see the gun just kind of twist and turn towards me where they point it directly at me. And it's again, you feel like a hamster sitting in a test wheel where they're just playing with you. It's a psychological form of torture where they know they can get away with whatever they want. And
it's terrifying, I imagine. Guys, I want you guys to conclude this show with your hopes for the future. I know it can be a bit daunting to be asked this question after everything that you've been describing, but can I get your views on what you hope for Palestine and for your own future? Leila, I would like to start with you.
The Palestinian right of return, Palestinian refugees all need the right to go back home to 48 land. The occupation needs to end and Palestine needs to be freed, point blank.
Mohammad, your take?
Yeah, like our dream is connected to each other. Like it's like our main dream is the refugees who are surrounding the war since the Nakba to come back to their own homes, and we have to have our right to self-determination and to get rid out of this occupation, and having our mainly and basic human rights. And yeah.
Sami.
So I lived all of my life under occupation, and I recently had a son, and I hope he doesn't. I hope we have equal rights, Palestine's liberated, and there's retribution for everything the Israelis have been doing.
Justice, accountability. Thank you all so much, Leila, Mohammad, and Sami, for joining us here on the stream today. It's been absolutely great to have you guys. And thank you all for watching. If you have a comment about our show or a question, don't forget you can always talk to us on social media, especially if you have suggestions for topics you would like to see us discuss here. We're always happy to hear from you. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream. Take care, and I'll see you soon.